Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Supernatural Substation, your last stop before the unknown. Or if you're new here, welcome. I'm your host, Eileen Pastanio, and my co-host, Bernadine Richardson, will be joining me shortly with our guest, Jason McLEOD. Jason is a paranormal investigator, demonologist, spiritualist, and intuitive empath. He is also one of only a small handful of investigators who began their instruction and career working for and with the late legendary Ed and Lorraine Warren. McLeod has spent the last 33 years helping individual families deal with the human spirits who linger in their lives and the inhuman spirits who seek to ruin them. He is the author of the Dark Siege series, beginning with Dark Siege, A Connecticut Family's Nightmare, the terrifying true case of demonic infestation, oppression, and possession, and Dark Siege 2, The Nightmare Returns, the devastating case of demoniacal retribution. Today, McLeod conducts lectures and presentations on the subjects of spirituality, consciousness, quantum physics, metaphysics, paranormal investigation, and demonology on radio broadcasts such as Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie and at paranormal and horror conventions throughout the country. He is appearing at over 30 major conventions in 2024. He is also the host and organizer of Defeating the Demonic, a live 8-hour extreme immersion event featuring real demonologists, deliverance ministers, and exorcists who reveal their most horrific cases. It will be held on October 20th, 2024 at the Bijou Theater in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Welcome back to the Supernatural Substation, everybody. This is Eileen, and I am with Bernadine, my co-host. Say hey, Bernadine.
Hey, everybody. Hope everybody's ready for Halloween.
Halloween is coming. It's a whole month. Quick. It doesn't just happen on one day. It's a whole month of spooky. I'm ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. I'm ready too. Well, our guest tonight probably is ready too. So we have Jason McLeod with us, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about him because there's so much about him. So he's paranormal investigator, demonologist, a spiritualist, and an intuitive empath. He is also one of only a small handful of people, investigators, who began their instruction and career working with the late great Ed and Lorraine Warren. He has spent 33 years helping individual families deal with human spirits who linger in their lives and the inhuman spirits who seek to ruin them. So, Jason, welcome to our show.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm glad we could have you on. I'm looking at your little bio there, and there's so much that we can talk about. So, but why don't you introduce yourself a little bit to some people who may not have encountered you before, and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, I'd be happy to. My name is Jason McLeod, and I've been born in Connecticut. I had always been interested in spirits and ghost stories and mythology since I was a little boy. And I started really studying and spending a lot of time in the libraries when I was in middle school, and studying. And I stumbled upon the work of Dr. Raymond Moody, who is the most famous past life regression hypnotic therapist in the world. And his book, Life After Life, really astounded me. And that's an in-depth study about what happens when people actually leave their body. Their consciousness vacates the physical body and goes off, usually during some tragedy, whether it's a car accident or some type of emergency in the on the operating table, or certain situations, heart attacks and so forth. And and they leave their body and they experience phenomenal things. They can see colors they can't describe when they come back into their body. And because there's no frame of reference, they can see shapes and see beings and hear music and have interactions and read the thoughts of those that are still embodied when they are nothing more substantial than a mist at that point, and often just a packet of energy like a sphere. And that sphere is very important as we discuss my life and history going forward, because Lorraine Warren, who I had the pleasure of working for and with later in my life, would describe those as ghost lights, and the little spheres or the orbs that they're called now. And that's pretty much all people describe them as, is just a packet of energy, a circle of energy. So I read his books, and especially Life After Life. I also stumbled upon the work of Dr. Edith Fiore, who was one of Dr. Moody's contemporaries or colleagues, and she wrote a book called The Unquiet Dead, and because she stumbled upon an entire field of study quite by accident, where she learned that actually that discarnate human spirits can cohabitate the bodies of the living. And she learned this when she put a young man under hypnosis whose personality had changed overnight, and actually hypnotized the spirit of an 80-year-old man who entered this young man's body while the young man was in a bar drinking alcohol, and which lowered his vibration and his frequency and his auric defenses, and this man was able to move inside of him. And the young man couldn't differentiate his own thoughts from the thoughts of the old man's. His personality changed. He desired things for breakfast that he'd never desired, and he had an aversion to all the things that he normally liked. He still lived with his parents when he was 21, and his mother was beside herself. She's like, "Who are you? You're not my son." And she finally had enough and brought him to Dr. Fiore. And she, after working on 30,000 subjects in her career, she's basically proven and is convinced that people can have up to 50 different discarnate intelligences vying for control of their body. They fade in and they fade out. Multiple personality disorder, split personality disorder, for instance, that's how these things originate. And absent any true psychosis, she says that most people in psychiatric wards who are having schizophrenic episodes are actually cohabitated by the spirits of other beings, other human beings who had left their bodies, who didn't cross over properly, who are actually animating and controlling the body because they very much want to feel alive. They want to fulfill their desires, whether it's alcohol or drugs or sex, or it affects and is one factor involved in this whole gender issue that's dominating our country, at least. So people are all of a sudden. I asked a drag queen one time, and I asked, "Would you be willing to go under hypnosis to determine if you might have picked up the spirit of a female who might be influencing you to feel like a female and dress like a female and go up on stage and be this female persona?" And he said, "I would be more than willing to do that because I have no idea where this came from. But all I know is I feel alive on stage, oh, I get to express myself." And it's very, very likely that is the case. And, we live multiple lifetimes, one after the other. In fact, we live parallel lifetimes simultaneously, which is fascinating. That's an entire field of study as well, because I really got into Dolores Cannon's work. And
hang on, Jason. Let me stop you. Did you hypnotize the guy who was the drag queen?
No,
did you?
No.
Oh.
I didn't know. I asked if he'd be willing to, but that didn't happen. But I think I'd love to do a great study with like 12 people or so.
That would be great. Yeah. So I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to know the rest of that story.
Yeah. I forgot where I was now. I'm sorry.
Cannon,
Dolores Cannon. I actually took the level 1 quantum healing hypnosis therapy training recently, several years ago, because I really wanted to explore more of that, because her books are amazing too. The Convoluted Universe books are just phenomenal. Anyway, I study consciousness. I want to know and learn what happens when we vacate our body. Nobody knows. Nobody remembers. Nobody knows where they came from or where they're going or why they're here. But these are very, very relevant questions, and any seeker of knowledge would want to know these answers to these questions. So I was just a sponge when I was a boy. I was a young man. I was just reading and reading and reading. I stumbled upon the book The Demonologist when I was a senior in high school, and that was a book about Ed and Lorraine Warren. And I hadn't heard of them before I picked up that book, but they were a couple from Monroe, Connecticut, and I actually lived in Monroe for a couple of years as a boy. And they were apparently the most legitimate and active paranormal investigators there were. And I never knew there were such a thing. There was such a thing as a paranormal investigator or a demonologist. I'd heard of mediums and psychics, of course, but anyway, I picked up their book. I read it from cover to cover. Scared me out of my mind for the poor families that were experiencing these absolute horrors in their own homes. Can you imagine inside your own home watching these horrible things take place and then having to flee your own home?
Yeah.
Awful. So, and then things happening to the children. No child should have to suffer in their own home from these evil forces that want to destroy them. And I put the book back on the shelf, and I knew, Monroe is only a half hour away. If I really wanted to, I could go find the Warrens. I imagined and meet them, but I just wasn't inclined to do so. 4 years later, I was living in Westport, Connecticut. I was in my friend's car. He was a former Army combat medic with the rank of captain and a current high-ranking paramedic in the Norwalk, Connecticut EMS system. And we were in his car. We're listening to the radio. This is 1990, and about the 3-minute-a-baby incident that the Warrens investigated, and Lorraine apparently solved. And I turned to my friend Lou after listening to the story, and I reminded him that I read that book, and I said, that'd be so cool to work with them. And he said, no kidding. And the next night he called me and said, you aren't going to believe who just called me. And I asked, who? Ed Warren. I was like, what? Right? Ed was having heart issues. He called the chief of EMS for a medic referral to join their team. And the chief of EMS gave Ed Lou's phone number. And Ed called Lou, invited him to their Monday night class at their home. And he told me that. And I said, you have to get me in there. It's time. And I attribute that to this day to the universal law of intention, right? That'd be so cool to work with them. And the universal law of conscious manifestation. Yeah, no kidding. And bam. He told Lorraine all about the synchronicity, and it's a synchronicity, not a coincidence, right? Synchronicity is something that is orchestrated by higher powers. Coincidence is just a fluke. But I believe, what are the chances of this happening, the next night? So he told Lorraine all about the synchronicity, and she nodded and smiled, and she knows how these things happen, right? People are brought together in these ways. So she said, okay, invite Jason next Monday. And, I, got to learn everything that Lou had learned on that first Monday night class. And we went in his car. We drove all the way to Monroe, to their home. And going up to that door, it was like walking into the wizard's castle, And it was opened up, and this young man named Drew Thompson answered the phone, and he's a friend of mine to this day, but he's a talented psychic in his own right, and I would say almost as talented as Lorraine. And he opened the door and let me in, and in the distance, I saw Lorraine, and she's taller. She's on the tall side with her telltale bun on the top of her head, literally gliding over me. Hi, Jason. I'm Lorraine Warren, honey. And she just looked right at me like she's looking through me. And I've heard that same comment many times. Like, she just look right through you and see everything about you. And she asked, how strong is your faith, honey? And I said, I have immense faith. I believe that I and the Father are one, right? I believe we all are. We're all connected to the Creator. We're never separate, no matter what we've done or what we believe. And she nodded and smiled, and she asked, why do you want to get involved in work of this nature? And it was always of this nature, right? Meaning spirit phenomena, haunting phenomena. And I explained, well, I read your book, The Demonologist, and I was terrified for the families, especially the poor children. No child should have to suffer the way that they do, and I want to help. And she asked, so it's a calling then? I said, I believe it is. And she said, well, welcome aboard. And invited me in, and we all took our seats, and in comes Ed, in his flannel shirt, coming up to the desk, and he pulls down the video screen, the old film screen. This is 1990, mind you. Hits the projector and starts showing, one of the cases that the investigators who were seated in before the desk, a good dozen people had been investigating and showing the evidence that they'd collected. So the process is that we would go over the cases that are currently under investigation, and the evidence would be shown because the Warrens would review that, or the evidence was dropped off to them to look at. And they only got involved in the very serious cases. They would send the investigators, who were very serious people, mind you, genuinely wanting to unlock the secrets of the universe and to be of assistance to people. There was no cell phones back then. There was no selfie mania taking place. There were no paranormal TV shows to try to get onto. Nobody was doing it to try to get famous. Back then in 1990, these were really serious people, and I was hooked because it was amazing to me. It's still to this day, I think, how incredible this whole thing ended up turning out to be. And the most fascinating thing is that we went over a new case that came to their attention that had just arrived into their files. And it was a newlywed couple. They moved into a house in New Hartford, Connecticut, and they had a newborn baby, and they would claim to see this apparition of a woman walk right through their bedroom wall, ignore them completely, walk down the hallway, stop in front of the baby's crib in the baby's room, scare the baby out of its mind, and it would walk right through the wall and disappear every night like clockwork. And they assigned Lou and I to that case. This was my first night. I'm like, what? Right? I was like, okay, I know, I wasn't opposed to it at all, but I was stunned. I'm like, I just came into this thing, and so I borrowed my mom's camcorder, old VHS camcorder. That's how old this tech was. And bought a tripod, and Lou and I went to this house. And I can spend a lot of time on this case if you like, but I'm not sure what you'd like to cover.
Oh, it's fine. Whatever you feel like talking about. Tell us about it.
Well, we set
it's your first case. I mean, I want to hear about it.
Yeah, that's true. I set the tripod up in the parents' room, aiming at the wall, and drew the blinds, lit a candle, so there's some illumination. And Lou and I and the husband and wife waited down the hallway in the baby's room, peering down the hallway, waiting for this grand spectacle to take place. And we all heard a crack and a bright blue flash of light, like lightning had gone off in that room. We all looked at each other with our jaws hanging slack. We all confirmed that we saw that, right? And I said, okay, this is the doorway opening. This is the portal, the Stargate, the wormhole, the vortex, whatever it is that she's going to come out of and now walk down the hallway. And I'm going to see a ghost for the first time. And we're waiting and nothing happened, right? So we walked into the bedroom where the camcorder was, and we all smelled a very sweet smelling almond smell, like an almond perfume type of smell. It was very strange. I'd never smelled that before. We all detected it. Nothing else out of the ordinary. We didn't feel anything strange or sense anything strange. And we went back into the baby's room, and there we waited again. And exactly 30 minutes later, because I was taking notes, as I was instructed to, another flash of light, half as intense. And upon re-entering the room, the smell was half as intense. And nothing else happened for the next hour and 40 minutes or so that we waited around for something to take place. We were all disappointed, obviously. But we wanted to see where that flash of light came from, because we didn't see where the origin was. We just saw it explode inside the room. It was like lightning, right?
Right.
And we put the tape in, and I have the pressing forward and play at the same time. So it's, rushing through, and you see the squiggly lines and the candles flickering. And we let it play. And then after like a couple seconds, we hear my voice say, "We've just experienced the second flash of light." There was nothing at all. No change in light whatsoever. But Lou said, "Do you hear that?" Right? And he picked up a heartbeat, a distinctive heartbeat that he's trained to listen for in medical cases and on scene. And he said he detected a second distinct heartbeat and a third rhythm. And he was literally white as a ghost. He was blown away. Now, there was no physical body in the room when the heartbeats were being detected, nor was the camcorder sensitive enough to pick up a heartbeat in somebody's chest. Right? But he picked that up, and nobody could explain it. So, we thanked the couple for allowing us to come over to, try to see what we can find. And we left. And I dropped the tape off the next morning to the Warrens personally at their house. And then on Monday night, we went over the class. We went over that tape at the class, and Lorraine explained that this woman was indeed there. She was present. She wasn't going to give us any evidence of a physical of an apparition or an image that we could detect in the form of a human body, but she projected that light directly into our pineal glands, right? Which are rod. That's right. They have rods and cones. They're photosensitive. It's our interdimensional conduit to higher frequencies, higher dimensions, and it's how we have full color dreams in a pitch black room with our eyes closed. It's how we daydream and see movies in our mind. This is another form of sight. It's psychic sight. And Ed always said, all hauntings begin in the mind. And she projected that light into our third eyes to see, not onto the electromagnetic tape and the VHS cassette, but the heartbeat was a completely different story. None of us detected that. And she projected that directly onto the cassette to be picked up for Lou to hear. And that blew me away. I was like, wow, it makes perfect sense. And it's totally, that's how some people, you can have a group of people and everybody can have a UFO encounter, seeing a ship in the sky or seeing beings or having some kind of experience, and nobody else will. Or there's no evidence for it, yet it happened to them. Or you have a group of people who will experience something while an entire group around them will have no experience. Because some people are having these things projected into their bodies, into their minds, their third eyes. Now, that's how easily these earthbound human spirits, this is just a normal woman, who had left her body behind. She's stuck in that house, or it's not residual because she's actually projecting these things and interacting with us. It's not like it's just a thing on repeat. So that was my first case. I was blown away. Now, I really, really hoped I could have seen an apparition, because how amazing would that have been? I mean, we experienced something on our very first case that investigators maybe never will ever experience anything that intense ever after investigating hundreds of locations and so forth. I'm convinced of that, and that's what the Warrens are pretty much saying. But I was completely hooked, and Lou was really disturbed about the heartbeats that were obviously directed at him, and he was about 50% scared out of the idea of continuing. And it wasn't until we went to Dudleytown, the cursed village of Dudleytown, as a group during the afternoon, a couple days later, that scared him out of his wits, and he was completely done. And what happened with that is he's a big, strong, burly Italian guy who's a captain in the U.S. Army, big dude, and he's running down this trail at us, toward the group. We got to get the hell out of here. Like, what's wrong? What's wrong? Calm down. And he said, what happened, right? And he said he was looking at a tree, and from behind the tree was like a shadowy form of what a garden gnome would look like, right? But just completely jet black, pointed hat, right? With big glowing red eyes, and it scared him out of his wits. And he could deal with physical horrors, but he can't deal with the supernatural stuff. And he was gone. I can't deal with this. And he left. And I wanted to stay the night. And Lauren, my sister was there. She's crying, Jane. And Lauren said, I don't advise you do that. This is a very dangerous place to be. People have gone missing. And I honestly think that the Dudleytown was the basis behind the Blair Witch Project movie. Because there's no crickets, there's no birds, there's no animals, there's no sound. People go missing. People go crazy, right?
Well,
all kinds of
obviously, there's a supernatural. That would be an elemental presence. So there's nature at work there, demonic entities at work. So. There are people who still see gnomes, all over. There are people who encounter fairies, and people just laugh when they say it, but and they get scared like your friend, because there's a lot of fear associated with those manifestations.
Right.
I would have run. I don't want to be around gnomes. No way. No, indeed. So, yeah. So, okay, go on. That was just my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm glad you've heard of the place. But it's it's a fascinating history, that place. But that's what hooked me. And I'd been on several cases, and Ed took me on my first demonic case and took me to a house that was allegedly infested with demonic presence. And I think it was just a test. He was just trying to feel me out a bit. So the story there is, we went to this house, we pulled up, we were in his car. He had a license plate called Ghost, by the way. So that was like the original Ghost Connecticut license plate. And that was fun. And we pulled up and he asked if I felt anything strange, and I said something feels definitely off about the place. I can't identify what that is. And we walked inside, and it was an older home and everything, and nobody was there. And I had no idea who owned the house or what was going on with it. But we went into the kitchen, and he opened the door that led down to the cellar steps, and he pointed and he says, "Down there," right? And I walked down, right? I'd never been afraid, right? To this day, I've never been afraid going anywhere. I've always known how protected I am, and walked down the stairs, slowly, went to the basement floor, stood on the cement floor, and then he turned off the light and slammed the door, and I heard him chuckling on the other side. And I believe that was a test, to see if I'd come scrambling and screaming up the stairs, "Let me out, let me out." And instead I just stood there and just, reached out with my senses and just asked if I don't know. I didn't know what I was doing. I was new to this. And I said, "Okay, do I detect anything? I don't really feel anything." And about a couple minutes later, he opened the door and turned on the light, and he was standing there and waved me up, and I came upstairs, and he said, "Would you like to spend the night?" And I said, "Well, I don't think that would be in my best interest." And he said, "Good lad," right? And he whacks me on the shoulder and says, "Always trust your instincts." And so we left. And I think that was just a test to see how, feel me out, I guess. But the interesting thing is the first case I went on with several of the other seasoned investigators. It was Drew, Donna, I believe Joe was there, her husband. I don't know if I should give last names or not, but we called them this. We called each other. Joe called us all the Scream Team because we were the Warrens investigators, and there was nothing like this anywhere as far as we knew. The Warrens were the pioneers of the modern paranormal investigation craze, and I don't think there'd be a single television show or a single paranormal convention or any of this stuff, if it weren't for the Warrens.
Yeah.
And at the time, we knew it to be special, right? It was a unique experience, but we didn't know how special it would turn out to be, decades later when here we are now. But we're all sitting there in this sectional sofa, and it's a very dark room, and Donna and Drew were saying there's this black form standing on the landing to the stairs. I went up a few steps, and there was a landing that turned and went up, the other angle. But there was this black form standing there that was darker than, blacker than blackness. I couldn't see it. And when they said that, I reached into my pocket and I withdrew a pair of blessed rosary beads that my grandmother had given me. And they're actually green glow-in-the-dark ones. And I just pulled them out of my pocket and put them in my hand and cupped my other hand over them. And Drew goes, "Jason, what did you do?" Right? "He has rosary beads. Put them away, quick!" Right? Then I'm frightened, and I'm like, "Oh God!" And I'm trying to fumbling. They're big and clunky, and I stuck them in my hands and stuck them in my pocket. Apparently, when I did that, this thing went zhoop, right up to me.
Oh no!
Went right in front of me. I didn't feel it, didn't sense it, but I was spooked that they said, "Put them away." And the second that I put them back in my pocket, it went zhoop, right back up to where it was. And when we had the class the next Monday night, they explained that situation, and I asked, "Well, what could have happened?" Right? And he says it could have burned you, choked you, bludgeoned you, scratched you, teleported you, any number of things. And I'm like, I don't think so. Right? I think, again, I've always thought I was protected. And he said, but it was your intention, right? Intention is everything in always, in everything that we do in our life. My intention was to preserve and protect myself, not to challenge it. If my intention was to challenge it, say, "Oh, back demon," or "I challenge you in the name of Jason McLEOD," I would have invited an attack upon myself that would have been really brutal. I believe he says, right? But that was never my intention. My intention always is never to provoke these things, but to protect myself and to protect the people that that I'm there to help.
Yeah, and a rosary is probably your strongest weapon for that.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what happened. That was my first case, and I can go on and on and on about all these different cases and so forth. There was an amazing case that I'm now writing a full-length novel about that took place in Vermont, and we all became aware of this case in that the family had fled the house. They were terrified. Again, how terrible and awful is it to have to flee your own fortress of solitude? Everything that you know and own, to flee that place because it's been infested by a force that is driving you insane.
Right.
with the attacks or the oppression that takes place. So I had volunteered to drive my mother's brand new caravan, Dodge Voyager, Dodge Caravan, and because she had just purchased that for her antiques business, and I know she wasn't going to be using it on the weekend. And I volunteered because I'm the newest, youngest, most enthusiastic member of the New England Society for Psychic Research, which we call NESPR now, NESPR. And I decided that I would pick up the Warrens and like 3 other investigators, and at least us 6 would go in the one vehicle. Anyway, I had woken up that morning, November 17th, and got dressed really early, took a shower, got in the van, and I'd done something I'd never done before. And I put my hands on the steering wheel and I said, I bless this van in the blood of Jesus Christ, that we are protected on our journey to Vermont, and we are protected on our journey home. And we arrive safely to our destination, and we return safely in Jesus' name, amen. And I opened my eyes and I said, that's strange. I'd never done that before. I got onto the Merritt Parkway, which is a beautiful, scenic 2-lane road, 2 lanes going north, 2 lanes going south, with a big grassy knoll with trees in the center. It's just gorgeous. There's big stone bridges that cover the parkway as you drive through. And I'm on the parkway, the leaves are falling, it's gorgeous. And I'm in the left lane of the 2 lanes, heading northbound toward Monroe. And in my rearview mirror, I spot this car racing up behind me in the right lane. And I said, okay, I'm in Westport. It's probably a Porsche, and he's going to blow by me at 150 miles an hour. And he goes zipping up behind me as expected, and then he matches my speed. Like he goes, like something, like he just slowed down. And then he's exactly going my speed. And I'm like, what the heck, And I'm paying attention because I'm a young guy. I'm trying to make sure I'm, traveling safely in my car. And all of a sudden, the car leapt car lane ahead of me. Like it just went, like he just like skipped, right? A car length ahead of me. And he's a black BMW, and I'm watching it. I'm like, what's this guy doing? I'm going like 55 miles an hour. And I start to see the car start to vibrate. Literally start to vibrate and shake.
The other
before
car?
my eyes, the other car. And then he starts to wobble, right? Like it's teetering left and right and shaking. Then he starts to fishtail ever so slightly. Then he starts to really fishtail, and white smoke coming out from behind the wheels. And he goes 90-degree angle right into my lane. I hit the brakes, and I plowed right into him. 90-degree angle right into his doors, blasted his glass out. The cars came to a shuddering halt, and I realized I was unharmed, and I got out, and I was more concerned about him. And I go up to the car, and I ask, are you okay? And he's like spitting safety glass out of his mouth, and he's like dazed and confused. And he's like, it's like I hit solid ice, And the state police came and examined everything, and they asked, what happened, and he explained the same thing, and he said, well, there's no ice on the roads. How can you explain what happened? Anyway, so thankfully I didn't get the ticket, even though I hit him, because he came into my lane.
Right.
The van was still drivable. There were no cell phones back then, right? So I had no way to contact anybody. I knew it was 45 minutes late or so already because of this accident, and finally cleared to go. And I pulled off the next exit ramp. I knew there was a payphone, ancient technology, folks.
Yeah.
And I called Lorraine, and I said, Lorraine, this is Jason. I'm terribly sorry. I'm late, but I was involved in a car accident. And there's a pause, and on the other end of the line, and Lorraine said, tell me exactly what happened. Right. And I hear comments, they're mumbling in the background, and they asked, are you still willing to come? And I said, yeah, the van's, drivable. I'm anxious to get up there and start our day. And she said, okay, come in the house as soon as you get here, my love. And that's how she talks. And so I pulled in onto into their road, and the other investigators are out there having coffee and conversing. And John Zappis looks and taps his watch and looks at me like I'd fallen, like I'd overslept or something, because they had no idea what happened. And I walked inside, and Ed and Lorraine are inside, and they're looking at Lorraine's like studying me, like just studying me, like looking left, looking right, above and below. And she says, tell me exactly what happened, honey. And I did. And she asked, how do you feel? Right. And I said, I'm fine. are you still willing to go? And I said, yeah, let's go. And I heard Ed go, see, Lorraine, I told you he's tough. And he whacked me on the shoulder. He likes whacking people on the shoulder. And again, it's to raise the vibration, right? He jokes around a lot, and he always did, because everything's so serious,
Right.
And when you're that serious and things are concerning, you're lowering your vibration. So anyway, so we walked outside, and Ed, gathered everybody around and explained to everybody that, I was involved in a car accident, and asked what I had done when I got into the van first thing in the morning, and he was basically educating the rest of the students. This is something that Jason was guided to do by, whether it's his angels or higher forces, his higher self or God or Christ or somebody. Because if I hadn't, maybe it's the caravan that I was driving that would have been flung off the road.
Right.
And maybe I could have been really badly injured or hurt. Again, I've always felt that I was protected, but I believe we all have the power to call upon that protection of God, the greatest power in the universe, which is God, right?
Right.
And I believe that protected me. Anyway, we got up there and up into Vermont. We picked up another one of the investigators up in northwest Connecticut on our way north through Massachusetts up into Vermont. And we got up there, early afternoon. It was really getting cold at that point up in Vermont. This is, November 17th. And big farmhouse. They actually had a farm. And the story is that there was a woman named Priscilla who was being rushed to the midwife via horse and wagon about 150 years ago to go deliver this baby. She was giving birth, and the wagon flipped in their rush to get to the house, and both their bodies were mangled. And apparently this woman had been seen on the property and in the house, as well as other very dark spirits and nefarious entities that were causing harm, and the telltale signs of demonic presence. So we turned on the heat in the house, which was a mistake, because that lent whatever was there energy. And there was a full moon that evening. We knew it was coming, so that was going to lend energy to everything. But we were in the field where this tragedy took place and taking photographs. The interesting thing is, though, when we had 3 people together, 3 of the investigators, when that trio was together, they got phenomenal ectoplasm photos. The ectoplasm being the white, goopy, misty substance or cloudy stuff that you see in the photographs that come out of people's bodies, their ears, their nostrils, eyes sometimes, or it's this energetic substance that's floating around them that these spirits use to manifest themselves, to make them visible. But anyway, so I'm holding this high-tech camera, and I'm aiming at the trio, which is a good distance away, and it says check distance, and they're saying take the picture quick, because the camera would, even back then, that camera was detecting that there was something out of focus, or there was something that was interfering. So we got really good photos there, apparently. But anyway, we all decided to go back to the house, and I felt, when you turn around, you feel somebody's looking at you, and you turn around, and you see that somebody is looking at you. That's what I felt. So I spun around to my right, and I looked, and I felt like she was behind me, this woman, a young woman named Priscilla. And I said, come back to the house with us. And I made a connection with her at that point, and I didn't realize it. And I didn't tell anybody what had happened, because I was the last person in the field. Again, I'm new to this, right? So we go back to the house. We all went out for lunch. We came back, and Ed was starting to initiate contact. He wanted to see what we're dealing with. So we all sat around this table. And I have the audio from this case, and actually I presented at these the latest conventions that I've been doing, because it's really intense. And the table starts to vibrate the same way that the car vibrated. I'm thinking this as I'm watching this happen. The car starts to wobble, or the big table is wobbling. Then it's shaking, right? And one of the investigators screaming, "It's coming! It's coming! It's coming! It's coming!" And it's wobbling, literally banging on all 4 legs. You can hear it in the audio, right? It's literally lifting on and slamming on all the 4 legs, teetering and tottering. And everybody's freaking out. And everybody was, interestingly, having a different experience simultaneously. Everybody felt like the table was moving toward them, when it could only be moving one direction as far as normal physics is concerned. But in metaphysics, it could be moving in each direction simultaneously. And everybody's having their own wild experience. Drew, my friend, is literally leaning back in his chair, like horizontal to the floor. where he should have just fallen over. And all of a sudden, my jaw drops and tears stream down my face. I go, Lorraine, the sadness, and I literally bawled my eyes out. I could not stop this overpowering grief that took me over. And other people had felt this incredible sadness too, especially the guy that was screaming. Anyway, that had happened 4 more times while we were on the property and twice more in the car on the way home. But Lorraine at one point said, "That's empathy, honey. That's your gift." And I would have rather, because I was sitting there before this happened, and Lorraine seeing this tall man in a big black top hat, the spirit, and Drew is seeing the same guy, and they're both seeing this woman, Priscilla, in her white dress. And I said, I want to see, but instead I got the empathy. Now, it would have been really cool to see a ghost, but to pick up the grief and the emotional sadness that this woman felt changed my life forever. It made me want to help every single one of these earthbound human spirits, to help them cross over and to end their situation where they're stuck in between dimensions, and help them cross over. And that changed my life completely. That was the catalyst that completely turned everything around for me. And it blew me away. So those are the first several cases. And, there are many more, including cases that I did in Washington State and in Idaho when I transferred out to school out in Eastern Washington. The cool thing though is when I was working with the Warrens, I was a student at Sacred Heart University in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and I wrote a newspaper column called Hauntings. So I was actually chronicling our cases together, including my very first one, right? Because it was a Catholic university and everybody was, really interested in what was going on, students and faculty alike. So that was really cool. I mean, it was just so cool. And then I picked up that same newspaper column when I transferred out to Eastern Washington State University, when they got wind that I wrote a column, and I said, well, let's bring the Warrens out to do their lecture, so we arranged through the college to bring them out, and we had them over to my fraternity house. I was the president of my fraternity at the time, so I had this big party for them, and we had a cake, and I have photographs of that, which is cool. Again, we didn't do selfie mania back then. You know what I mean?
No.
That wasn't the purpose, and that wasn't part of life. We were experiencing things, and they were trying to take pictures, of course, of evidence, but we weren't always just taking, group shots all the time and posing with each other. It just wasn't necessary. But I'm glad I have the newspaper columns and the photographs, to, bring that history together. But that's how it all began. And that blew me away. And then, I graduated. Lorraine asked me to investigate a case in Idaho. After they left, they got involved. They got a phone call from a frantic family in Idaho that was just about 20 minutes over the border from where I was in Eastern Washington. And they asked me if I would be the lead investigator in that case, representing them. And of course, I was thrilled. And that is actually a book I'm writing about now as well, called Rage and Rathdrum. Writing both these books simultaneously. I just, with all the huge amount of spare time that I have in my life, it's ridiculous. So anyway, after I graduated, I did many, many cases out there. I met an amazing 2 psychic friends that became my psychic moms, Barbara and Valerie, and a scientist, and they became my 3 best friends out there. They were, a generation older than me, and but they were amazing people who really helped my spirituality blossom. The Warrens approached everything through a Catholic perspective. I became an expert at sufumigation, using high church incense and frankincense and myrrh, prayer and holy candles and holy water to cleanse homes. And because that's what Ed taught me. And that's what I really became proficient at. And that's what I really enjoyed doing. But anyway, lots of history in Washington. But when I returned to Connecticut, I said, I'm going to put on a seminar based upon everything that I've learned at the Westport Inn. And because that's where I lived, in Westport, and I put flyers around in different locations and newspaper ad. And I got a phone call from a frantic woman in '93 who was explaining that, she was desperate to get through to somebody, and she never could. The phone lines were always garbled, or they would drop off. But she finally got a hold with me to tell me about the horrors taking place in their house in Monroe, of all places, They had no interest in the paranormal. They had no idea who the Warrens were. They had no idea who they can confide in, you know,
Yeah.
with regard to all this activity. And anyway, she was so thrilled to be able to converse with me. And at the point where she was about to give me her address, it went all garbled and crackly on my end. And I knew something was really serious, and I actually had to wait. I prayed, of course, that this would be relieved and that they would be able to get through, and they did eventually. But this began a case which was my most fascinating, mind-bending, frightening, terrifying of my career to date. And they were never going to talk about it. When it was resolved, I'll get back to the case. A six-year-old and her mother were driving by Union Cemetery just before Halloween in 1993. It was a very stormy afternoon, thunder and lightning and walls of rain and whipping leaves. Classic, right?
Yeah.
And they got diverted into the turn in near the cemetery because it was raining so heavily. And Kelly, Mom plants the idea in her head: be very watchful, Kelly. Maybe we'll see a ghost.
Oh, God.
Before it starts to storm. We wouldn't want it to follow us home, would we? She's like, stop, that's scary, But then she's looking for it, right? And she actually spots this shape in the cemetery, right? It's this black ovoid that actually collapses itself into the shape of a man with 2 arms and 2 legs and a head. No features, right? And she's 6. She doesn't know how to describe this. And it's walking right through the gravestones, right through the wrought iron fence, right up to the car as the car is slowly passing by, and he turns his head and he's looking at her. And Kelly's, completely freaked out and ducking, beneath the ledge of the window, to avoid being seen. And when she peeks up, he's actually looking at her, now standing in the middle of the road, and vanishes before her eyes, comes right up, blipping closer, literally dematerializing and rematerializing closer to the car. And she's panicking at this point, and Mom is Mom's completely oblivious because she's driving in this horrendous storm. He comes right up to the rear window and scared her out of her mind, and Mom cut the wheel and almost crashed the car because of the slick pavement and the leaves. And when she asks, what in the world are you screaming about? She's like, he was so scary. She's like, who is? The man, the ghost, just like you said. And she's like, oh, Kelly, there's no such things as ghosts. She's like, there are too, and she's hoping it's all over with. But this spirit, this earthbound human spirit that Kelly was able to perceive, followed them home. Nobody believed her. The 16-year-old brother Tyler made fun of her. Oh, boo, And the dad just rolled his eyes and says, there's not going to be any talk about ghosts. This is nonsense. And Kelly's, sobbing, and nobody would believe her. Nobody's going to believe her. It's imaginary playmates, whatever, all those things that people would say. Well, Mom actually sees him as she pulls open the laundry room doors in the kitchen. This shadowy form goes walking right through the washing machine, right through her, right? Oh. And she doesn't believe it. Of course, she's like, what in the heck, right? And then there's nothing to be seen. And she's like, are my eyes playing tricks on me? What's going on? And she went, confided in her best friend, Julie. They went out to the mall together. And when Tyler, the brother, and his friends had the house that Friday afternoon to themselves, one of the guys spotted this guy walking the outside perimeter of the property on the stone wall. He's like, who is that? And they're like, who's who? And they go up and say, there's this dude walking on your stone wall. And they open the sliding door, and they're 16-year-old kids, and they go running after the guy. Hey, what are you doing on our property? And they get out there, and there's nobody to be seen, and there's also no footprints. It had lightly dusted with snow, and there's no footprints on the stone wall. And they look back at the house, and the sliding glass door is closing by itself. And when they run off to get to the door, it's locked. One of the friends tries to open it, and then when Tyler tried to open it, it opened easily. And he says, "Were you guys playing games with me?" So therein starts the troublemaking that takes place, where they start to divide and conquer and separate friendships and things like that. But anyway, they had another experience in the house, and they said, Kelly's telling the truth. Why is this guy after my 6-year-old sister? So they ran to the mall and bought a Ouija board, which was the worst mistake they could have made, obviously, because then they brought it home, being 16-year-olds, issued all the wrong challenges and all the wrong, commands. What are you after my little sister for? Come after me.
Of
and
course.
therein they invited other spirits into the house, and there began the most incredible phase of infestation, leading to oppression, leading to possession, requiring exorcism we've ever experienced within a week. And it was absolutely mind-bending. And they got a hold of me, and I came to help, but I had also called Ed, and because I'd just gotten back to Connecticut, and I'd been doing my own thing in Washington State after the Idaho case. Anyway, consulted with Ed about this because this is serious stuff, and without giving the rest of the case away, we resolved it. But the horrific, mind-bending, unbelievable stuff that happened to this family. I talked about how even a human spirit can project a light into our head, right?
Right.
This case involved mass projection of millions of black flies that everybody saw that were just disappeared without trace when they came back into the house like 2 minutes later, when they fled the house. A pool of urine, stinky, disgusting, deep yellow, gross urine in the exact spot where they had used the Ouija board, to the point where bath towel after bath towel after bath towel that they'd retrieved from the garage that this dad used for waxing his cars could not absorb. It was like it was a never-ending pool of disgusting smelling urine, and then gone within a flash, all the towels bone dry, smelling like car wax instead of the urine smell. All of the organic foodstuffs in the refrigerator, a big boom sound, right? All of the food from the refrigerator was teleported onto the floor of the kitchen in a giant mound of rotting, molding, disgusting, stinky organic food that it looked like it had been sitting there for months, rotting, right?
Yeah.
And inside the refrigerator, all of the containers completely sparkling clean, like they'd been run through the dishwasher. So all the organic matter had been moved. All the plastic and the glass remained.
So you've got that kind of crosses into demonic activity.
Well, of course, this was
right, obviously, but the original spirit was. I would think it would be someone or something that's been out there. It could have been human at one time.
Mm-hmm.
But because I always say, that you don't really have to be afraid of the dead in cemeteries. It's what's in there with them that you're afraid of, right?
Yeah,
and there are spirits, especially in old burying grounds where maybe people go for rituals or for legend tripping or whatever.
Yeah.
But that sounds to me as if something, maybe a devolved human spirit, but that's what it was originally. But obviously, the Ouija board. Just took it up to the next level. And
well, you're right on the money. Yeah,
right.
He was an earthbound. He was a very negative earthbound human spirit who simply wanted to make a connection with this bright, vibrant, sensitive little girl who turns out to be clairvoyant because her mom's an artist. So Ed always says artists are all sensitives, and children of artists are often sensitive. So she was actually clairvoyant. She didn't know it, and she actually saw him, and he knew it, right? And he said, "Oh, I can make a connection. I can." Tell my story. He didn't intend to frighten anybody, really. But then the dumb teenager the son and his two friends used the Ouija board, and the spirits that came through that invitation are the ones that were causing all this activity. And
right. They totally suppressed the original
and
guy.
he actually fought against them, in this struggle, as hopeless as that would be, against 8 different demonic entities that came through. They all rang the doorbell, one after the other, by the way. So after this whole thing, they went to bed upstairs.
Well,
so they woke
up.
Yeah, they woke up at 3 a.m, right? And to hear, ding, this clang, clang noise, right? Like coming out of a deep, deep, deep sleep. And then about the third time that it rang, Tyler recognized it as the doorbell. And his friends are like, "Who's coming over here at 3 a.m, or who's coming over here this late?" And Tyler says, "This early? You mean it's 3 o'clock, 3:02?" And then he looks out his window, which is above the landing. There's nobody out there, of course, and the lamppost is flashing on and off. The lights are going on and off in the living room. It rang 8 times with nobody to be seen because 8 different intelligences came through. And if you think about the comedy here, right? Visualize these grotesque things, parading themselves through the lawn up to the front door and ringing the doorbell as they walk through, like, here I am, thanks for the invitation, type of thing. It really is amazing, Anyway, this was the most unbelievable case that I'd ever become involved in. And the family was never going to talk about it. And here's the thing, is the most severe cases nobody will ever hear about because the family is terrified of a return, which is exactly what ended up happening. These spirits came back after them a month after the exorcism for what Ed called the most devastating case of diabolical retribution we've ever seen. They went after the bishop. They went after the psychic first. They projected it. This thing appeared in her kitchen, right? And it was projected into her mind. It wasn't physically present. As all these things are in our heads, because there's nothing's physical. Everything is vibration and frequency. So this thing projected itself into her mind, standing in her kitchen. It was a 9-foot tall behemoth of a black bear-bodied, owl-headed, tentacle-fingered, talon-footed, feathered amalgamation or chimera of all these different
demon.
Yeah, exactly, right. And its fingers were these long serpentine fingers were trying to slither around her. She had a crucifix in her pocket, but it projected into her mind image after image after image, like movie images of what it's going to do to everybody to punish them who stood against them. The family and friend, the bishop, the neighbor's dog, which was pivotal in the first case. The boys, the 3 boys, the teenagers, the older sister, little Kelly, the mother and the father. And, she screams after this thing disappears and runs for the phone to contact the bishop to say this isn't over, And anyway, there began this second phase a month later, 33 days, really, 32 and a half, 33 days after the original exorcism. And numbers are important too, and this included incubus and succubus attacks. They went after two of the three teenage boys. One was secretly gay, and he got an incubus attack in the form of one of the other friends that he secretly had a crush on. This trio of friends or best friends. The other friend had a succubus attack, which took the form of Tyler's older sister, Sarah, who he had a crush on. So they take the image of the object of your desire to work their way into your embrace, to allow it to happen, and then they ravage you. And these 2 boys were just completely destroyed over this. And I had to make it a second volume because so back to this, they were never going to talk about this case, right? 1993, because these spirits came after them again with such a vengeance, they were terrified of a three-peat. It's always much worse if they can come back, right? And Bill Bean says it's 7 times worse. I mean, I don't know how you can differentiate. He's a good friend of mine, a powerhouse of a man. He's one of my speakers at Defeating the Demonic this year and last. But he said it always comes back 7 times worse through the recognition. Right? We told them when it was over the first time, put it out of your mind completely. You are free from this, right? You're protected. Right. You're free. Don't ever think about it. Don't ever fear it, right? Just completely let it go. And when you ever start to think about it, let it go. Change the images in your mind and change the subject in your mind. But they went after the psychic first, the clergy, and then everybody else. And it was absolutely mind-bending. So in 2012, when I learned that there were all these paranormal teams out there, right? I mean, I had gone off and done my own thing and lived my life. It wasn't a full-time thing for me by any means over the next several decades. It was just dabbling. And I learned there were hundreds, if not thousands, of paranormal teams. XYZ paranormal this, paranormal that, with the T-shirts and the baseball hats and the sunglasses and the
sound like me.
Okay.
I always
say
they got the black T-shirts and the jeans and
It's like, what is this, right? And then that was bad enough. I said, I've worked with the pioneers of this entire field. How fun was that, to see all these people, branching off to do their own thing, and good for them. But then I found that some were using Ouija boards inside people's homes when they're there claiming to help. I'm like, what? And I called John Zaffis, and he's like, "It's an epidemic," And I'm like, "What the fuck?"
It's ghost hunters that did it.
Yeah.
That's what blew it up. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing, right? I was with the Warrens in their class when Lorraine was proudly boasting that Warner Brothers has expressed an interest in obtaining all their cases. How thrilled they were to be able to bring this to the world, not just through their college lectures and books, but through the media empire that exists, right? So, and I remember very, very clearly when the first pilot idea behind Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures was presented. They asked Drew, my friend Drew, the young man who opened the door for me when I first walked in, if he wanted to be on the show, and he said, "I will never be part of scripted tabloid television." And he knew, because he knew that's what it was going to be. And he to this day, he says, "I want nothing to do with it," right? Because it's just turned into this ridiculous circus. It's nothing like it used to be. And anyway, so I called this woman involved in this case, and I explained to her what's happening, where these paranormal groups are using Ouija boards inside people's homes. And here's her response. She says, "My God, if you can spare one family from the nightmare that we went through, especially a little girl like Kelly, then change our likenesses, but tell our story. You have to tell people not to make the same mistakes that we made. But please, by God, make sure nothing comes after us a third time." Right. And I said, "Yeah, my word." And, that's when I decided I was going to come forward in 2012 and write about this case. And as I was writing about this case and changing characters and things like that, so that nothing would come back to affect this family, and burning frankincense and myrrh around my desk the whole time and praying and so forth, and getting looked on and checked on by my friends who are amazing mediums and psychics, to make sure that nothing's being drawn to me by recollecting this stuff. I released what I call Dark Siege, DARKSIEGE, A Connecticut Family's Nightmare is the subtitle. And I wrote it in 3.5 months, and it's 467 pages. And I said, I'm going to do something completely different. I'm going to recreate this entire case in a cinematic horror style, true crime style, because I wasn't there for the first half. Right? I relied upon everything that the family told me. I arrived midway through. So I said, I'm going to write myself in as my own character, because it's not about me. This is about an average American family and the total nightmare that took place to them by a chance passing by of a cemetery, and then the use of a Ouija board because the 16-year-old brother wanted to find out why this guy's in the house after his little sister. I mean, they really had good intentions, but being teenagers, they challenged these spirits, and then they came right in, and then they kept challenging them, and things kept getting worse. But so I wrote the book, and I thought, okay, this is going to be put out there. I'd worked with the Warrens. I said, this is a big deal. It should be an instant, mega, super worldwide phenomenon. Because I had an English creative writing degree, I write really well. That's a fact, but it wasn't until I found that there were paranormal conventions. I was like, "What is this?" Right? So I said, "All right, I'll go and I'll rent a vendor table at X. I think it was Mid-South Paranormal was the first one I ever went to in Kentucky, Louisville." And I rented a table. I got a banner made for the front of my table. I had the books in my possession. I had some kind of like simple signage. And I went to this show. I met Bishop James Long. Had a really great discussion with him, handed him my book. He read it. He became an instant friend and a huge supporter of my work from that day. And he promotes me all day long. Not all day long. He promotes me very often. And he said he never promotes other people's books, and he never suggests books. But he said, you have to read these books. And on my website, darksiege.com, if you scroll down, I have his wonderful quote about my books, and he's just been a huge supporter. He made my books required reading for his online demonology class, which is really great.
Excellent.
And he actually, when I wrote volume 2 in 2014, because there was the second portion of that family's ordeal to tell, including the incubus and succubus attacks, I called him and I emailed him. I said, I'm really hesitant to include that because I write in a way that makes you feel like you're right there experiencing everything alongside everybody. And who wants to experience that?
No,
right?
yeah.
And he said, he said, you have to release it as is. He read the whole book cover to cover. He couldn't stop reading it. He'd go out and walk his dog, and he couldn't wait to get back in and read it. And that's
That
a
is
huge comment. And he said this whole thing caused goosebumps on my arm because it brought back the memories of all the exorcisms that I've done. And anyway, he says you have to include it because people need to know that although this is very rare, it is so very deadly serious that people need to seek help from clergy immediately. Please don't change it, right? So I kept it in, and with his blessing, literally, and published it, self-published it. I self-published my books because I had seen what was going on with all of my mentors' cases, right? They sold their rights to Hollywood. They manipulate the cases. They add things in that never existed. They subtract things that are very important because it doesn't fit their formula, and the integrity of the cases get completely destroyed. For instance, I also met at my next show I did in Gettysburg, Carmen Snedeker Reed, whose case was portrayed in the A Haunting in Connecticut case, right, which is the funeral home.
Yeah.
And she became lifelong friend of mine. She said there were no bodies in the walls, right? In the movie, they put bodies in the walls in the funeral home. They were all falling out of the walls like some horror. It's a horror movie, but she said it just is so ridiculous. Now, who does that all fall back on? My mentors and friends, Ed and Lorraine Warren. Makes it look silly. Oh, look what they made that up. They didn't make it up. Hollywood changed it, right? So I decided I was going to self-pub my books, and I'm so happy I did because I've maintained full control of them. I sell them like hotcakes at all these conventions, which is really great. And I tell people, it's not meant to terrify you. It's meant to empower you and help you understand what this family went through. So I also did something completely unique in that not only creating it in a cinematic horror, true crime novel, horror, Stephen King-esque format style, I included a chapter-by-chapter analysis at the end after the book is over. So each chapter, I break down what the family did right, what they did wrong. In some cases, compared to other very well-documented cases that the Warrens investigated, cases that I investigated for the Warrens or on my own.
Right.
My understanding about the science and spirituality behind the paranormal, why some people are affected by ghosts and some are not. It's all about frequency and vibration, love being the highest, or heart-centered compassion for all life being the highest, and fear being the lowest, and how to protect yourself and how to pray, how to summon the protection of Archangel Michael, which when done correctly is instantaneous. There's no time or space outside of the third dimension. These angelic forces need our permission to be summoned, just like the demons need the permission to be summoned. We have free will, right? Anyway, it was remarkable, and I'm so happy I did that because I was originally going to say I was just going to do the analysis as a separate booklet, which would never have flown. So it's a horrific story in the beginning, and then the last 100 pages is a detailed armchair discussion about how and why this thing took place. So I did that and repeated the same style with my second book, and they've been so well received, and I'm so pleased I went that way. But I believe that everything is orchestrated, like the initial synchronicity about getting involved with the Warrens. I've had so many synchronicities throughout my life that bring everything together exactly when it's supposed to come together, with the right people at the right time. And one of my things is, for some reason, is I bring people together. Right. An example, most recent example is, I have a friend in Australia. She helps me with all my artwork, graphics, and advertisements lately. Really huge help. She's actually the one that's the artist behind the graphic novel version of the Dark Siege graphic novel that we're bringing out, which is beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. And it's she has a team out in Australia, and they became involved in this case involving voodoo. And this old practitioner is actually trying to kill her own grandchild. And the grandchild was literally at death's door. There's nothing could help. And I went to Parapsychon in Ohio, in Mansfield, Ohio, this past summer. And I'm good friends with a medium named Greg Nichols. And he came up, Greg Nicholas, and he came up to me with this woman next to him. He says, I have to introduce you to Stacia. I think there's some reason I need to introduce you to the two of you. And I said, oh, this is before the show started, so we're able to talk and have a conversation before the masses of people come in. And it came up that she actually is an expert at handling voodoo. So I said, I'm dealing with, my friend is dealing with a horrific case. It's a really severe case. There's like different levels of it or something. I don't know anything about voodoo. And I put them together, and she actually has another friend who's even more of an expert and actually has resolved this and stopped these attacks from taking place so that this young woman, the woman's own grandchild, can recover, right? And rebuild her strength and live, right?
Yeah.
That's how insidious this stuff is. And it boggles my mind. I mean, how people can go out of their way to hurt people, especially their relatives.
Voodoo, I mean, we're here in South Louisiana. I'm in New Orleans, and scene is over in Lafayette and Bayou Country, but voodoo is pernicious. I mean, and in more, it's people use that umbrella of voodoo, but really it's that hoodoo element of it that you can kill people with. Anybody, the average you can start a whole thing, start a spell, start a whatever, and kill, curse, hex, everything. And it's just really pernicious. And I talk as someone who was involved with that. And it just gets really pernicious. Like, for instance, one guy just randomly said, "Oh, I got to go off of a chat board. I got to go. I'm having a party, but I have to go clean up," because he had to go clean his brush and look for nail clippings and ear, like Q-tips and anything that had any personal whatever on him, because he was having people over who all did this crap, and he didn't know if anybody had something against him, and all they needed was a hair or this or whatever. It's just, it's just a dirty sort of a feeling, and it's, I talk about it there. I mean, I've been to rituals and stuff like that. I don't do that kind of stuff. Never did, but it's just sort of a pernicious type of magic that anybody can really do, and they don't realize how much harm they can do. Burning candles, you think you're just burning a candle, and a lot of people are burning holy candles that are fixed for voodoo. So they're appropriating the Catholic iconography and all that. I mean, I have stories in my own family of just problems from that. It's just horrible. And those spirits will do anything. As long as they're fed, they'll do anything.
Don't these people understand or believe in karma or the repercussions of going out of your way using your free will for harming somebody else?
And they'll harp on it and harp on about karma. And they want to deliver the karma. They do. They'll tell you, "Oh, karma's going to get you." But they think in their mind, let's say they're doing something like that woman was doing to her grandchild, that she's justified. She's, whatever spirit is in her head is telling her, you're justified. The one that started the hate, started the envy, started whatever it was that made her attack her own blood like that. You're justified in doing that. You're right. You're right. And these, as in any kind, I'm sure you've encountered this where spirits, any spirits are saying, "Yeah, you're right. Yeah, now kill yourself. Now cut your wrist. Now do this."
That's the demonic right there.
That's
exactly it.
That's the whole element. I went to it's called a couche, and there were 3 women that were becoming priestesses. It was a festival thing. It was kind of like a fest thing, but that was going on at the same time. And they had the man, the voodoo priest, who was going to couche the women and, anoint them as voodoo priestesses. Well, they were burning, like, they had like an altar set up outside. And there was some like Maxwell House coffee can pots. Okay. I mean, that basic. And they were there were 3 of them burning for each of the women, one for each of the women that was being couched. And he was Haitian, didn't speak a word of English, spoke French, the patois, the Haitian patois. So I didn't interact with him at all. I didn't like the vibe off of him at all. And I saw him right in front of us come out and put his hand over the pots, like pass it around just a little bit over the pots, and out of every pot, the flames just leapt up. They just leapt like they were reaching for his hand as he moved himself away from it. And I found out later that the one that was the highest was the most powerful of the women that was in there. And they were in a separate area, but he was testing them and making the fire burn. I'm not kidding. I got up. I was like, that's it. This is not a party anymore. I was like, I don't like that. I didn't like it. My daughter was with me and she's like, we need to go. And I was like, yeah, you're right. So we just said goodbye. It turned from a potluck to
a potluck, literally.
A literal potluck. Like, who I don't want to, and see just the spirits that are there and what you're talking about. It's about spirits going home, attaching themselves, all this other stuff. And a lot of times I was just stupid and I should know better because my mother went through a lot of that when she was dabbling in the occult back in the 70s, back when the Warrens first came out and Hans Holzer and all that. She dabbled in, and then we ended up with a demonic haunting in our house. But you think, well, I've read enough and I've seen enough and I do enough. I know, I'm just going to do this little offering, or I'm just going to put this nickel on the altar. I'm going to leave 15 cents at the cemetery gate. And you think, because I know, it's not, it's okay. They're not going to do anything to me. Well, I don't. 180-degree totally sent me back to my faith, the experience that I had, which I'm going to write about my actual experiences. But the experience that I had sent me right back to my faith, and I won't touch the stuff. I can tell you all about it. I can, whatever, and talk about it, but I won't go near anything. Rituals, none of that. I don't want any part of it,
Right.
Right. Because in a lot of people, I just want to touch on a couple of things that you were talking about, like Ouija boards. Whenever this comes up, like a lot of times on Facebook, or you're looking, or even people talking about it, oh, there's nothing with the Ouija board. But obviously you don't feel that way. So, they are absolutely dangerous, right?
Ed, my teacher, said the Ouija board's most dangerous piece of negative occult paraphernalia in existence, responsible for 95% of all the cases of demonic infestation and oppression, which leads to possession, that he's ever been involved with. Now, I have an amazing event. This is a great segue. I put together an incredible event last July called Defeating the Demonic. And I brought in Archbishop Ronald File Enright from California, he's been an exorcist for 46 years. I brought in, with 1,000 exorcists under his jurisdiction, mind you, Bishop James Long, Archbishop James Cloud, who's actually under Archbishop Enright, who's actually a mental health professional and an exorcist himself. Reverend Bill Bean, who's just a powerhouse of a man. I worked on a case with him in upstate New York, who's also a deliverance minister, and myself as a demonologist trained under the Warrens. And I brought them together for a 4-hour and 45-minute seminar. Blew them all out. Had an amazing full 4-hour and 45-minute seminar called Defeating the Demonic, showing the reality behind how these forces weave their way into our lives, most often through evocation and invocation, right? Rituals and Ouija boards and seances and magic and all the things that they do to try to summon these forces into their lives intentionally or inadvertently through the use of a Ouija board, where you're innocently trying to communicate with your grandfather, right? Who passed. Okay.
Right.
All of these things lead to these situations. Bishop James Long went into there's actually people out there practicing the lesser keys of Solomon while using a Ouija board, and they're finding sigils of demonic sigils, trying to summon these demons into their lives on purpose, for the purposes of gaining something. These beings hate humanity with every fiber of their existence. All right, and Archbishop Cloud and Bishop Long said the same thing. Let me give you a piece of advice. They'll come when they desire to come. Not when you're strong and healthy, but when you're sick, when you're in the middle of a divorce, you lost your job, you're bedridden, you're indigent, you're a derelict on the streets. That's when they'll pounce. And like Archbishop Cloud said, these things look at us like they're the lionesses on the Serengeti, right? And that we're the wildebeest. And they'll go after the young, they'll go after the infirm or the injured first, because it's easy, right? But they'll come when they want to. They exist outside time or space. They don't have to come, they can come in 15 years when you completely forgot about inviting them into your life, but they didn't, right? And that's when they'll pounce. So, They both said the same thing. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Now, here's the thing I explain to everybody from my own understanding is that we can only see visible light while we're in these human bodies. We are so limited in these bodies. It's it's really pathetic. We're as blind as a bat, and we don't even have sonar. We can perceive visible light with normal humanity, which is less than 1% of everything around us. Yet people say, if I can't see it, it doesn't exist. God damn it, right? So you can't see what's going on when you're using a Ouija board, what doorway is opened or what it looks like or what portal or what, anything, and you'll be completely oblivious to the fact. And through this doorway come beings, interdimensional beings too, not just demonic beings, but anything else that has a way through. And they'll affect you. So anyway, I put together this amazing seminar last year. I sold out. I did live stream. There was a VIP dinner. It was a phenomenal occasion. I had the whole thing filmed. So this year, I'm doing something 3 times as big. It's a full day seminar called Defeating the Demonic in Bridgeport, Connecticut on October 20th this year, 2024, at the Bijou Theater, which is it's actually the oldest live entertainment venue in the country that has been completely refurbished. It's a gorgeous theater now, like it used to be. From 8:30 in the morning, the doors open. The show starts at 9:30. We go till lunch. We have a 1-hour break. We go then to dinner, which is a 2-hour break right across the street. There's a VIP dinner at this authentic Italian restaurant. And for those who want to stay at the theater, there's 3 screenings during that 2-hour period. And then we get into the final segment, which is the most intense aspect where they're actually showing actual demonic voices from possessions, from exorcisms. Archbishop Enright is going to show these demonic symbols. There's this chart, right? They're the symbols that identify and correlate with the names of these demons that appear on the bodies of the possessed. They're tagged, right? They can appear under the fingernails. They can appear inside the interior of the nostrils. They can appear in the clefts of the buttocks. They can appear any number of places, the most outrageous places possible, but they appear, and he has images of it and photos of it. Right? It gets really intense, and the purpose in this event is to show that people, through their own God-given free will, invite these forces into their lives in most cases, without even knowing it or doing it intentionally for the purposes of gaining some kind of mystical power for themselves. And they may for a while, but then the bill comes due. Right?
Yeah.
And so these guys in these cases are the last line of defense when it comes to paranormal teams going out there and sticking their noses in things they shouldn't be doing, challenging spirits or provoking them. And like Bishop Long says, challenging something. Come on, demon, I dare you.
Yeah.
That's not provoking. That's inviting. You're provoking when you're praying the litany of saints and you're praying, to Christ and to intervene. And it's amazing, but it's a full day event. People can find this out if you go to darksiege.com, DARKSIEGE.com. The very first thing you'll see is a video, which is a promo reel from last year. Turn the sound on and you'll hear it. You'll see all these amazing men explain, from segments last year. And then you scroll down, there's the poster with all the guest speakers and all the times and so forth. And by clicking on that, or left clicking or pressing or tapping on that, it'll take you right to the Eventbrite page. And when you click the right Get Tickets button on the right side, it'll open up, and then you hit the white button on the right side that says Buy on Map. You'll see the entire layout of the interior of the theater. You can get general admission tickets by tapping on the central area, which is all the theater seats, or there's table seating. You can actually tap or click on the actual table seat that you want and arrange to get those. If you scroll down further on my website, you'll see the live stream option. You just click on that or tap on that. And the same thing with the VIP dinner. It's amazing. Nobody has done anything like this. There's nothing like it anywhere. It's 11 days before Halloween. If people are looking for something really, really mind-blowing to experience, It's a full day. And we have, also on the website there's a scroll and it says full schedule. And it'll list all the topics, all the seminar segments, who's conducting them and what the content is. And then when you read that, you'll understand that this is something that you have to go and check out. The knowledge is incredible. And like Bill Bean says, knowledge is power, and they stand against these forces of darkness. And like Archbishop Ronald File Enright says, you have to be connected to a higher power. We are in a spiritual battle of epic proportions right now, especially. And the amount of cases that are taking place are skyrocketing because these people are, the evil one's minions. It's like they don't even care anymore. They're going to pull off the masks and they're going to present themselves as who they are, right? They're not hiding anymore, right? And these people have woven their ways into all aspects of society, and they know that this epic battle is coming, and it's you have to choose. You have to choose sides. And like I was talking about these people harming their own relatives, or going out of their way to use their free will to harm somebody else. You're going to pay for that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean,
how about we all love each other?
All of them are going to close their eyes and they're going to have to answer for it. I mean, there are just like, there are so many videos of these, screeching, screaming, paranormal, quote unquote, teams on YouTube going doing all these events. But there are just as many I have found of people who've had near-death experiences, people of all walks of life, but, some of them were into bad stuff, into evil stuff, into crime, but they've had some near-death experiences where they're suddenly aware, self-aware on the other side, and they're sitting in flames, or they're standing next to a burning lake of fire, and so people just don't realize, that it's very real, that, this doesn't end. Your personality continues on the other side, And so there's just these videos where it's like for 20 minutes I had devils all over me, or I was standing in fire, or I'm on fire. It's just and some of those videos come from nurses and people who are like there with people at the last minute, and they're screaming and hollering because it's here to take them, And I listened to you talk about the weird way in which that one demon manifested to that woman. And a lot of that I have come to understand is because not only do they hate us, they hate the idea that we have any kind of command over them, good or bad, right? Like, for instance, priests, archbishops, the church, right? They hate that anyone has any control over them. And when they have to appear, it's like you could get just a sprig, a juniper sprig just hanging in the air, or you could get something that looks like a cow with 6 heads, or because they are coming into this reality because you've called them here, and you're not going to see them how they look where they are. Which they're just incorporeal spirits. But when they try and get in here, it's like, you're pulling these things in through a keyhole. And they're just going to show up in the way. And then, you want to command them, and all these warnings, about people who are going to do this kind of goetic magic, when you're talking about sigil magic and all that, and you want to give them a command to do your will. There's always a loophole. Everybody, they say you have to have a rock solid command. No, no loopholes, no openings for them to do. There is always a loophole, because some of what they can do is they know the future, because even Satan knows the future. He knows what's coming. So even these demons, right? Even these demons. Okay, you want me to give? It's usually love, money, or revenge. Okay, you want me to bring you a lover? Okay, but there's a loophole in there somewhere. And, for instance, I know a fact that somebody wanted a lover, but they had him, but they were dead. I mean, that's how they got their lover, So, they can't be trusted, these things. Do you have any hesitation? I know you were talking about the presentations and all that, and them playing, video and sound recordings. I guess there's no danger of anybody maybe becoming possessed or attached while attending and listening.
So it's a great question. So last year I had everybody sign a waiver, and that's just on my end, but It's going to start off with Archbishop Enright ringing the bells, right? And it's called divine resonance, and that's why church bells rang, is because they raise the vibration. They horribly affect anything of a low vibration, causing them to retreat, right? So it's going to start with that. We're going to pray over all the audience. People will be blessed as they walk into the audience if they so choose. We start each of the 3 segments with prayer, and Bill Bean ends the entire presentation with his amazing prayer. And the man is amazing. He'll get rid of any hexes, vexes, curses, and spells, or any of that stuff. The guy's incredible, because he has unshakable faith, and he was tormented by demonic spirits as a young boy, up and from 5 to 12. His family was destroyed. His mother was killed.
Yeah.
And he was at a point where he was seeking death, and now he wouldn't trade his life for anything, for anybody or anything, and he can't believe, that somebody like him with his history had been completely changed and transformed into this spiritual warrior. And he's out there driving all the way across the country, sometimes starting out at 3 a.m. because he refuses to fly. And he
I don't blame him.
drives all over the country to help these people, and puts his neck on the line, literally. And the stuff he's seen is incredible. And he talks about it.
Yeah, we have him coming up because he had to reschedule for just that reason, right? He had a case going on previously.
Yeah, he's always on the go.
He's supposed to be on October 9th. He is the date he rescheduled for. And we had him on once when we originally had a show on the United Public Radio Network, and we had him on maybe more than once, a couple of times. His story is extraordinary. And,
he's amazing. I love being near him. Being in his presence.
You're pretty amazing too.
Well, thanks.
You got a heck of a pedigree. Can we call it that?
I guess.
Yeah.
But just being in the man's presence and having all of us together from last year was just such a powerful. The conversations that we would have, like around a lunch table, at a restaurant prior to the event starting, but we thought about, man, people would love to hear this conversation, and they were, because we're sitting in a restaurant, people are looking at us like, oh my God, and it's like, who are these people? But I tell everybody, I'm doing the Warren Seekers of the Supernatural Paracon this coming weekend. This will be my 4th consecutive year, and as for somebody who's worked with both Ed and Lorraine when they were in their prime, I'm very, very pleased and proud to have had that experience, and I'm very happy to be able to celebrate their lives and their careers as one of their proteges. And it doesn't make me any more special than anybody else, right? But the history is important. And that information that I convey about my personal experience is an insider's perspective about what that was like. And, I keep telling some of the other investigators, I'm like, look, even some of the older investigators are, dropping off, and their stories are dying with them. I said, we should be out there discussing what this was like to work with them. And there's so much negative press lately about them. But, I came in in 1990, right? Before the Devil in Connecticut. I'm sorry, after the Devil in Connecticut, the Haunting in Connecticut, the Amityville case, the Annabelle stuff, the Nun, all that stuff. That was based on a real character, but a real nun, but Hollywoodized. But when I came in, I have nothing but wonderful, positive things to say about both Ed and Lorraine. Lorraine was always very concerned about the safety of the investigators. And if you remember, when I had that car accident, she almost called the entire investigation off because they both realized that something had taken control of that BMW, which was black, right? Frequency, right? Low frequency, and flung it into my lane because they did not want us to arrive there to intervene. And they almost called the whole thing off right there because what kind of power can take control of a car? What are we getting ourselves into? And the other thing is that she actually canceled the investigation, early because people were actually being shoved, like pushed, not shoved so they'd fall down and tumble down the stairs, but literally pushed from behind, like get out, And she took the safety of her investigators very, very seriously. And I love them to death, and they were like the grandparents I wish I had, even though I love all of my grandparents, But to being able to be in that situation is incredible. But I'm going to be at the Warren Seekers of the Supernatural Paracon this weekend in Gettysburg, and celebrating their careers. and selling my books and all my stuff. And the purpose is always, to just warn people, look, don't open doorways, and to reach the kids and say, don't play with Ouija boards. They're sold as a game, sure, but they're not.
Well, Ouija boards, tarot cards, pendulums, all the, even homemade Ouija board type stuff, all that. They don't, one of those 72 spirits that you're talking about with the goetic sigils and all that is the spirit of divination. And I won't name him, but he is present, and it's whenever you use tarot cards, he's the one that's working this communication, hooking you into it by, different images. Well, tell me this, tell me that, until you're doing it every day, until you pull a card every day. So you can't go out your door unless you pull a card to see how your day is going to be. I mean, that is, and the mirror stuff, scrying in mirrors, the Bloody Mary thing, that falls under the purview of that demonic entity. Right. And it's one of the main things he does is lure people in via communication with spirits. So it should be left alone. But, but if you can just get people to leave the Ouija board alone, that would be a great accomplishment.
I got in so much trouble. I was in Salem for the whole month of October in 2014, and here I am, Mr. Being Light Worker, Mr. Love and Light, telling all the kids to return their Ouija boards that they'd purchased at the stores. And finally, the store owners coming over saying, "You're ruining my Halloween business." I'm like, I'm trying to spare people from the nightmares that these things can cause. And anyway, I got in trouble because they didn't like me at all because of that. And I'm just trying to help people. All I'm doing is trying to help people and say, look, focus on the wonderful things in life. Don't go, looking to speak to the dead and speak to the unseen spirits, thinking you're gonna gain something. You're gonna lose eventually. Mm-hmm. And in the book, even though it's terrifying, it's empowering at the end. It teaches you, for instance, thank you, Archangel Michael, for being here now, right? For drawing your sword and for protecting me in all ways, always, right? For keeping my house and my pets and my family safe, my cars, my conveyances, my property, for ensuring that everybody who enters this house is safe and protected always in Jesus' name, right? That type of stuff. And so it is, right? With no doubt, anything you ask for in faith, you shall receive. Thank you for being here now. Right? Not please come help, which means I don't know if you're hearing this, if I'm worthy of being heard, if you're going to come, and if you do, I'm not sure when you're going to come and in what capacity and how interested you are in really protecting me. But, if you want to come, please come help me. That's so weak, right? You're not really, you don't have the faith. You're not believing that it's taking place. But anything you ask for in faith, here's the thing. And the thing that bothers me the most, or just makes me roll my eyes, is nothing can defeat the creator of all that is. Mm-hmm. The infinite, the absolute, right? Creation itself that created all these, everything, created us, our souls, right? Created the demonics, created everything, whether they're fallen angels or whatever they are, right? The audacity that they think they can actually defeat the creator of all that is, that gave them life and consciousness in the first place, is just so ridiculous to me that why would they even try? And when they possess somebody, when they succeed in invading somebody's world and breaking them down and dividing their family and possessing and grabbing hold of somebody and unhooking that person's consciousness and sending it to the side and assuming control of this body, and they know that an exorcist is going to become involved, that's going to call upon the highest power there is to defeat the interloper. Mm-hmm. You would think they'd have the common sense to say, I'm screwed, I'm leaving, right? Why go through this torment just to hang on for every last moment when I'm going to be cast with holy water, which burns like acid because it's a high vibrational frequency, right? Mm-hmm. Filled with the power of the creator. And I'm an extra low frequency, demonic spirit, whatever they would call themselves. I wonder what they would call themselves. And I'm going to be prayed over, and I'm going to have the power of Christ be invoked, and I'm going to have to suffer through all this stuff. They still hang on. It's like you should have common sense, but they don't have any common sense if they think they're going to defeat the creator. but they should have the common sense to say, I'm out of here, bye.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it doesn't make any sense to me. But the fact is, Ed Warren said that it's not just Catholic priests that can expel these demons. He's seen Japanese Shinto priests, he's seen shamans, he's seen rabbis,
Right.
imams, all removed. They all have rites of exorcism, the equivalent of the rites of exorcism or delivering people from these evil spirits. They all do. And what do they all call upon? God, or their version of the all-powerful creator. So, I mean, for people to elevate the status of these demonic spirits by, and like Bishop Long said, putting God to the level of God, putting these demonics to the level of God, and reducing God's God to the level of a created, meaning people are celebrating death and darkness and demons and evil over the creator of all it is. It's just mind-boggling to me. It's like, are these people completely lost? I had a woman come up to me, a young woman, she's in her young 20s, at a show. And she was at a Comic-Con, so she was dressed with her fairy ears, and she had black contacts, and she came up to me, and I was telling her my spiel, and she asked, it seems like you don't look upon demons favorably, right? And I said, why would I do that? And she says, well, would you allow me to tell you my story? And I said, okay, tell me your story. And she had reached rock bottom, and she wasn't getting any answers from Christ or God, and she wasn't feeling empowered at all, no connection, right? So she called upon a specific demon, whose name I will not pronounce, and made a blood pact with him, and wrote out a contract and sealed it in her own blood. She pricked her finger and sealed it in her own blood.
Oh my gosh.
Was very proud of this, right? And I said, well, what happens when he turns on you? Oh, he can't do that because I put it in the contract that he can't harm anyone that I love or myself or this or that. And she had lost her job and she was terrified. And then after she'd done this, she got a phone call from her boyfriend. Baby, you'll never have to work again. I just got accepted to Delta Forces. He was a special forces guy. We're going to have more money than you know what to do with. You'll never have to work again. Oh, that's such and such demon, helping her out. And I said, can I film you explaining this to me just so I could share it with the bishops and so forth? And there's people that believe it, right? They believe they're going to be special and they're going to get protected. They're going to get protected by dark forces and they're going to get money or fame or glory. And we can get into the whole Hollywood and music industry and how they all sell their souls for power and fame and glory. And the rituals that they take place in and so forth. It's all coming out now, especially. But it's insanity. All the riches in this world, are not worth what you're going to deal with in the next, simply because you're harming others and that you're aligning yourself with darkness.
Absolutely. And this material world is the lowest vibration reality that there is. And that's why we decompose when we die. It's putrid. Christ had to come in here and become human in order to get us out of here. It's like, no, your demons are not going to save you at the last minute. They're not, They're not the ones giving you the job or the, I always think of Rosemary's Baby as a good example, like when he agreed to let his wife get impregnated, then all of a sudden he started getting all these acting jobs and all that. And I've heard that repeated in real life. I have heard that repeated. I have seen people say, I asked for this and this and that, and I got it, all that. Exactly like I asked for it. And I was like, well, you don't think you're going to have to pay up for that? You're going to have to pay something at some point. Nobody gets anything for free, especially not from them. I don't know why people don't leave them alone. These demons, they're here. They serve a purpose. In this universe that God knows why they're even allowed, to coexist or to come into contact with us. But I don't think that purpose is something that anybody wants. I mean, they're here to gnaw on the spirits of the damned for, in the eternal abyss period. That's it. They're waiting. And these people who seek them out, and then they act like they're big. Oh yeah, my demon, my demons. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're a demon.
Lane, what just popped into my head?
What?
if like just for one day, if people would automatically be able to see, like in Walmart on the street, when
Mm-hmm.
people are laid out everywhere, if they could actually physically
See 'em.
see the attachments on people, the demons roaming around, the human spirits roaming around, if they could just see what's really going on between this world and that world that's actually
Yeah.
here,
Mm-hmm.
we can't see with our eyes. If they
Right.
could see, I think it would change the whole world.
Oh, I think
Sure.
so too. And just
It's like
like
they live.
Jason, yeah, just like you said when you took the rosary out and the spirit was like on you immediately. There are
Yeah.
people, sometimes, see, I had a chill because sometimes when you think about it, these things are right there. They're in your face. They're staring right at you,
Yeah.
and they're this close. And Dean mentioned Walmart, which is a special kind of hell.
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know what they're doing. If they're testing out some kind of, MV, what is it,
Feel it when you walk
EMP
in.
or,
Yeah.
huh?
You can
Wait.
feel it when you walk
Oh, I
in.
can't stay in
Yeah.
Walmart. I mean, it's like I go through like a tornado. Got to get this. Got to get that. Got to get out because
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a special. I don't know what it is. I think my daughter thinks it's like it's like some kind of cell tower. 5 or 6G that they're experimenting with. And I believe it because it's like I come out of there and I just feel completely drained of energy. I just come out hating people and not wanting to be around anybody, which is not good,
That's not good.
obviously not good, but that's how Walmart makes me feel. It's
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
when I turn my basket and there's 82 people in an aisle, it's like, and they're all trying to go different. It's like mice in a maze, but you're right, Dean. If we could see what we were making those deals with, if we could see these people who are actually literally signing books in blood still in satanic and demonic and Luciferian rituals, I know I don't want to keep you too long, but there's a woman named Sloan Bella, and she's a psychic, but she had, sometimes she's crazy. Okay. I mean, I like her, but she's all over. But she had the best explanation about what especially the music and entertainment industry, these celebrities, that I've always known that, like Johnny Depp, or let's take, one of the most popular ones, Johnny Depp, Adam Driver, or whatever. Especially him, because look at him. I mean, he's really not attractive, but women love him. And the more they love him and they throw all that attention at him and he becomes a celebrity and it's feeding that celebrity and putting him out there. And that's what the demons around them are doing. Well, she explained that they literally sign themselves over. It's a pact. They sign it with the music industry or with the entertainment industry, which all the way up goes, back to the puppet masters at the very top who are practicing cosmic type rituals over the earth. And she said that when they die, their spirits are enthralled to these agreements. Their spirits are held in the etheric sphere of the earth, and they continue to provide energy to that spell, that cosmic working that's going on, that's preparing us for the coming of the Antichrist, the coming of the, the tribulation. And that was a good explanation. It made sense to me then that they don't pass on. They're chained here. And so they're stuck in that etheric region with all of those spirits. And just because you die, it doesn't mean that you're good, you're improved. If you're a mean person in life, death is typically not going to improve you, or if you're a murderer in life, you're probably bad, in death, and you're going to be influencing other people to commit crimes and stuff,
Right.
So, but that's one thing I think that kind of explains it to me, and descriptively anyway, of like they've made their deal, they've made their pact, and they're not getting out of it. These demons are going to hold them to it. Once they're in the unseen world, then they're fully aware of what it is. They're fully aware.
There's another aspect to that too, is that for everybody in the Hollywood and the music industry, I've heard this many times, is that they have to sacrifice. They have two options: sacrifice their firstborn child, or if they don't, they have to raise their first 2 children as the opposite gender.
Yeah.
And they're
you're right.
it's
I
all
have heard
hidden.
that.
Yep. And the number of stars, and that can happen, that first sacrifice can happen at any point in life. But there's so many stars who it's well known that they've lost their first child uh, in those ways, and that they that's part of the hold that they have over them, and it's all coming out. And people, I wrote my 4th book called Renegade of Light is about this hidden reptilian archonic presence that's overlaying the planet, and that's the adrenochrome harvesting and the child sacrifice and the satanic child ritual sacrifice and the harvesting of organs and all this stuff, the cannibalism by bringing the meats from these sacrificed humans to the fast food chains, and that everybody's participating in cannibalism without their knowledge. But again, it's without their knowledge, so it doesn't really have that much impact. But I know it sounds nuts, right? But it's all this stuff's going to come out, and even us that are very well aware of a lot of this stuff, they say we're going to still be completely blown away when everything is revealed.
Yeah.
And we know a lot, and gosh, so the Nag Hammadi scriptures, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Gnostics, the pre-Christian Gnostics mentioned through the use of psychoactive potions, altering their consciousness, they described this world as an artificial construct. It's an inversion of the high frequency paradise Earth. This is actually a inverted, twisted, low frequency fallen version created by this being called Yaldabaoth, which is the origin of, which is also called the Demiurge, which is this blind, demented, gigantic octopoid type of creature, right? That's a god with a little g, right? Not God with the big G, the creator of all that is, but a created being, apparently by Sophia, this other entity.
Sophia Beste, yeah.
And that it is the origin of and the controller of the demons, the jinn, the watchers, the flyers, the Cheetah Uri. They're all the same beings, described throughout history as the same type of malevolent spirit that seeks the ruination of souls, and like we were talking about, and that this is it is the Matrix. We are living inside an artificial construct. Now, there's an amazing man I've been following named Jason Bashir's, who runs Archaix, ARCHAIX. It's an acronym for Artificial Intelligence Research or something like that. And the guy is incredible. And the information and the mathematics behind all of his information about the fact that we are living in a gigantic simulation or a holosphere, and that we are immortal spirits who are traveling through this holosphere, and we believe it, just like David Icke has always said. I've followed him for 3 decades, that we are hijacked, our perception is hijacked, and we're jacked into this matrix, this simulated reality, like we're wearing VR goggles, right? And when you take the VR goggles off, like what happens when you have a near-death experience or when people actually die and escape this realm, you're pulling off the VR goggles like, oh my gosh, that appeared so real. But it was just a dream. It's just a simulation. Like we're in the Star Trek holodeck, right? And we're having it. And what's funny is I use the same analogy in my Dark Siege book that I wrote in 2012, is it possible, and I believe that it is, that our higher self, which is the higher version of who we are on a higher plane of existence, because we said this is the lowest plane there is, the lowest frequency of Earth there could be, is hooked into or sitting at a console. Visualize your higher spirit self sitting in a beautiful temple type of scene, sitting at this advanced computer console, playing a simulation, massive multiplayer role-playing game, playing you. And that we are the avatar for our higher self, where our higher self is experiencing this lunatic asylum, which is what we're in right now, especially
Yeah.
through our avatar, right? And that when we get tired, right,
Mhm.
our body lays down and goes to sleep, and our consciousness disconnects from the game,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And that when we die, our body dies or our avatar dies, it's because the higher self consciousness is taking a break and not playing the game anymore. And then
Yeah.
it can then log in later when our body decides to wake up in bed, and
Yeah.
we wake up in bed completely exhausted, even if we sleep for 8 hours, going, "Oh my God, I'm back in this hellhole." The
Yeah.
low vibrational field. It's so cool. I mean, there's so much we don't know, and I'm so happy to have been able to have this conversation because you definitely know a lot yourself, and it's great to discuss
Well,
with people these things because
and
if we
people,
don't,
yeah, I don't think you're crazy.
well, I'm
Because
not
a
crazy.
lot of, I know a lot of people think, and it's just coming out so much. And that's why there is a feeling of whatever the plan is, that it's
Yeah,
accelerated,
yeah.
Now, a lot of people, when I talk about, when I think about it, and then I can't kind of express myself because, I can't tell people what to believe, but it's like when I said earlier, like Christ had to come in here and get us. And they often say, especially in the Catholic Church, which I am, that he paid the ransom for our sins. Well, the
Mhm.
question that occurred to me or began to occur to me was like, well, so who'd he ransom? He's God. Okay. So who's he ransoming us from? And it began through, just looking at my faith and then the occult things, because my mom, just briefly, when the things happened when I was young, when our house was like that, and we had demons in our house. And then, I think they contributed to my mother's early death. And it's a long story about that. But I went into studying the occult, not occultism. I'm not an occultist, except I study it to understand what happened. So, I kind of I was like, so who's in here that he had to ransom us from? And he's ransoming our persons, which is our spirits.
Mhm.
We are we, and when we die, that person that I know as Bernadine or you, that goes on to be with God. The body decomposes, but the soul goes back to the creator, right? So I'm like,
Right.
who's he paying a ransom to if he's God? And it was like, it's some other God. And the analogy that I came up was like, and I was trying to explain it to my daughter, and I was like, well, think of a basketball, okay? Holding a basketball in your hand, and there's everything's going on inside that basketball, but you're outside of it holding the basketball. This sounds so ridiculous just saying it, but that's God. And he's like, I got to get in here. I got to go in there and I got to get him out of there. I got to get him out of the basketball. And what's in here with us does not have our best interests at all. I mean, you see it, in Mecca, they make the pilgrimage to Mecca, Muslims, and they circle and circle around this big black sphere that's in the middle of, right, the cube. And Saturn is brought in then.
Right.
They
Right.
begin to, the Saturn is Cronus, okay, the
Yeah.
god who ate his children. And, Saturn is of all the demons, if you're going to do evocation on a particular day, then you want to call the demons of each day has, the demon attached to it, the angels, the spirits that can help you. This is in evocational magic. And Saturn, on Saturn's day, on Saturday, most of the grimoires say you should really leave that alone. It's like you should severely leave that alone, like stay away from them. That is death. That is retribution. It's not just Pluto, like, bringing transformation and karma and stuff. Saturn is black. It's death. And that is the God that's in here with us. That is the God that's
With little G.
a little G. That is the God that is in here with us. It is not there when they say, and I mean, I can't call out the particular faith, but there's a whole mystical system that they came up with that's their God. And now it's beginning to be exposed. abortion. And, I don't really go into politics. Abortion is blood sacrifice. That's all
right.
it is.
That's right.
It's blood sacrifice.
That's
and
right.
we are the most blessed nation on earth. And yet we kill 63 million babies. I mean, it's 63 million since they passed Roe versus Wade. And it's like it is like the faith of some people. It's their faith, their ideology. They're atheists, so they don't believe in that. And I mean, there's a whole, you brought up David Icke and all this other stuff, but initially at the beginning, you talked about the trans problems, that go on with that, and the gender dysmorphia and the confusion and all that. That is spirits. That is people just say, oh, well, they're not crazy, but people used to call that schizophrenia. It used to have a definition.
It never existed. I didn't.
Right. No, I mean, there always were people who dressed up as the other sex. There were, and for whatever reason, a constant is homosexuality or gay people. There's always if you look back through civilization, I don't know why, and I don't know how much exactly, but some portion of it always seemed to be gay or, just homosexuals and lesbians. It was a constant, and it just was part of, but this other thing and the fact that different. This is different, and this is an absolute, an absolute inversion of everything. I mean, everything, right. All
it's
evil.
An inversion of everything that is good. Like Bill Bean says, the time will come where good is described as evil and evil is described as good, and you have this insanity going on. So I look at that as, they're pulling down statues of the Ten Commandments and they're sticking up statues of Baphomet. Right, the demon lord of confusion, where there's little girl looking up on one side of the chair and a little boy look up on the other side of the chair. Confuse everybody. They're confusing genders. They're confusing people. There was a black lady. I watched an interview, and she was raised, I think, in the 70s or something like that. And she said, they didn't give us free housing. They didn't give us free health care, but they sure gave us the ability to murder our babies. Right.
Right.
Allowing us to go in there and kill the black children,
more than any
else.
other race. Yeah.
And this, you're right about politics, but it's like if we don't speak up now, it's like those of us that still have common sense, who see these things, we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings or cause any backlash. We just want to live peaceful lives. But now's the time. No, I know. That's why I'm doing this event called Defeating the Demonic, because it's all connected, and it's all
it absolutely is. Everybody, I mean, they and look at what's going on in the Catholic Church and that Pope. That's not my Pope. That's not a Pope. No, he is an absolute. And he is, Saint Michael is set out for him. That when that day comes, he's coming for him. That's it. Yeah. I mean, but what he's doing, there's a remnant. I mean, they're trying to get rid of the Latin Mass because because that language, ecclesiastical Latin, and I know you know this, is the most damaging, is the most powerful against demonic spirits. Just speaking in Latin, in ecclesiastical Latin, to the demons hurts them just as much as holy water or anything else. So they want that gone. And they did this all with Vatican II and all this stuff, but they infiltrated the church. I mean, really, we haven't had a real church since before John the 23rd, but definitely Vatican II. But nobody ever spoke about this before. And there's like people from all walks of life who are putting stuff together. So all of it has been accelerated. And I mean, everybody lives, like my mother, when she was little, it's the end of the world because World War II, right? It's the end of the world. Everybody that lives in a time when they think, it's going to end soon in my lifetime. 1,000 more years pass. But there has never been a time where so much has lined up and humanity is capable of so much. I mean, everything is lined up and we are capable of extraordinary things. AI, CERN, people laugh at, I mean, I have a friend, Melanie is her name, and she is about as concerned about CERN as I am. And interestingly enough, she practiced demonology. She doesn't anymore, but she worked with demons. And her biggest concern is CERN. And I was like, I agree with you. Because they're not just doing that for no reason. They don't want to just bang things together.
Portals.
They want to let that dark matter get into us. And they get,
Right.
and when they do, and it's every science fiction movie, they can't handle it. They're not going to know what to do with this. You know, I'm worried about that because I don't trust them people at all. You know, it's like they want this. People don't realize that when the end comes, it's going to be every freaking movie that you've ever seen, every fantasy movie, every science fiction movie is going to be happening right in front of your face. You're going to be a part of it. You're going to be this mass of humanity that is moving back and forth between good and evil. And, you know, I mean, they don't realize it. And it can start one by one with some kid in a dark room with a Ouija board. Yeah. If they get one kid and they get that soul, they damage that soul so that it can't go back to the creator, and they enthrall that personality to them on the other side. That's one victory. You know, I mean, I didn't mean to go off into like political thing, but you're right. And defeating the demonic, it's the most important thing we can do right now. Nobody can look at it. I don't care about who's, you know, left or right. Nobody can look at what's going on and say, this is not a spiritual battle. They can't say that. This is a battle. And what we do right now is we need to prepare ourselves. We need to gain right now, whether we agree with what's going on or not, or we agree with this candidate or that candidate. We need to pick the one that gives us ground to gain on. Because if we don't, and if we pick the wrong one, that's much closer to the apocalypse, honestly. Right. I mean, that's just how I feel.
Well, I feel you're right on the money, and I'm so happy to hear all of that because, you know, especially with your background and the way that the things that you've studied, realizing, you know, like Bill Bean says, it's like, you know, Satan can't sick the demons on us, right? But we make choices, and God gives us free will. And if we let those demons in or just open a little crack, they'll come in and Satan will send the demons and they'll kick the door open, and then they can have access. But the power of God, the creator of all that is, through Christ, you know, Christ consciousness, right? The highest frequency there is, can expel them at any point, but damage can be done, right? It's not irreversible, I don't believe. But, you know, look at Bill's life, you know, you've had problems and so forth in the past, and, you know, we can overcome it. But we can only overcome it with the highest power that there is. Worshiping these demons by name, or these idols, or these beings, or whoever they are, they're all lesser. They're all creations of the one creator, right? Yeah. And the thing that's fascinating is that for people who doubt that this is true, these things go out of their minds, berserk, at the mere mention of Christ or Jesus or summoning in the angels and things like that. They're completely trembling and debilitated, and they lash out. You know, I've seen it. You know, there's power in that, right? There's power in it, and we have the power to call or summon it for our own protection. You know, get in your car. I wash this car in the blood of Jesus Christ, right? I wash my body and my fields, my energetic fields, in the blood of Christ. You know, that type of stuff. It's so important, and like Archbishop Benright says, we are in a spiritual battle between the forces of good and evil, and you have to make sure you're connected to a higher power, and the highest power. So everybody that's hearing this, I really hope you go to my Dark Siege website and you click on the Defeating the Demonic event. You click on the full schedule icon, which is a scroll, and it'll give you every seminar topic being discussed, who's leading it, what the content is. There's nothing more timely and more important than this.
We'd like to thank our amazing guest, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's show. If you have, please give us a like and a share, and please consider subscribing to our channel. We'll be back soon with another great guest. And as always, thanks for listening, and good night.